Joe Moore, the mixologist. So first of all, tell me, what the hell is a mixologist?
Oh, mixologist is an art form, originally a profession in the hospitality trades. So it is, and my grandfather was a publican. He owned a pub. So I think the first time I learned to pull a beer, I was probably about 4 years of age. But that was just a bit of family fun. A mixologist is someone that really understands the ingredients really well, understands the chemical reaction that happens between those different ingredients in the flavors, is able to create, let's say, evolutions of standards and, turning them into something new or adding a little bit of a spice, a sideline to it, but also able to create unique things that are new, concoctions, if you like. But even more importantly than actually knowing all of that is the way I feel when I walk in and they're able to assess who I am or ask the right questions and where am I at. And so if I'm not sure about a friend of mine, an older army buddy, and I, we have this thing called, we're on the search around the world for the world's best margarita. And it's a very simple drink, but if you get the balance wrong, it's just not right, okay? So we can always usually judge a bar by how good its margarita is. But sometimes when I arrive at 11 p.m., because I've had a long traveling day, which is, way back in my past memory now, over the last 18 months, but you're tired and they say, well, what do you feel like? I'm going, I don't know. And they say something creamy or something light. And so a mixologist is someone that's able to really hone in on what you're trying to say without really saying it, if you know what I mean. They're really able to pull out of you what it is and deliver. And they say, well, okay, I'll make you something. And they come up with that and then they give you a taste test. And they say, how is that? And if your reaction is like, oh, then you're on the right track. If your reaction is, well, it's not bad, but maybe a little like this. So to me, it reminds me always of minimal viable product, or reminds me of how we pull our frameworks together and how we approach things with our, with our customers, etc., and how we engage people and our employees. So that's why mixology is, it's an art form and a science mixed together. And I think that's our world as well.
Yeah. So you can't be a mixologist and a best practice bigot at the same time.
It might be just the terminology, best practice. Let's say best. What is best? Best. The best. Yeah. What are we measuring the best by? Who says it's the best? Yeah. How do we know it's the best? For me, best things like best practice, it's just the best way we know how in the now. It doesn't mean it will be best in another 6 months.
Or it might not be best in a different context. And that's maybe why a mixologist needs to be sensitive, I suppose, to the context. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So there were obviously people who were upset with the title of the talk.
Oh, really? What was the feedback?
The feedback was, how can you say it's insane to implement best practice?
The insanity of trying, the insanity of it. Oh gosh, in so many ways. I think it's part of that, people expecting the silver bullet, the magic button, the best practice, the whole cookie cutter thing. It just
It's you can call it what it is. It's just stupid. Yeah, to expect that you can take something off the shelf and it will work for you. And really, I think that's the context of the conversation, is the fact that we don't debate that there's value in best practice, but it's a tool. Yeah, tools don't solve problems. Yeah, people solve problems.
Yes, that's exactly right. You have the best systems in the world, but it's the people that make it happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so if you go into a new customer as a mixologist, and they most probably contacted you because they got to know about you because of your involvement in some good or best practice, and you're involved in quite a few, but we'll get to them. What's the first thing you do?
Why? I ask them why. I become very childlike.
Okay.
I become very much the, I want to understand, well, what brought you to me? So, oh, well, we heard about, or someone said, or we saw you on, or, that sort of thing. I wouldn't say I exactly overtly advertise per se. It's usually through things like the podcast, or I'm at a conference, or, webinars, things like that. And through the wonderful recommendations of my industry colleagues as well. And I think, so they say, oh, well, we heard about you through, or something like that. And I say, oh, well, that's wonderful. That's really lovely to hear. But, okay, so have you had a look at my LinkedIn profile yet, or my website, or what have you read or seen? What prompted you to actually contact me? Because that's the first thing that really, I think, gives you an insight into the engagement level. It's not so much, I don't want to jump straight into, oh, okay, well, let's do this and let's do that, or, straight into the consulting style questions. I want to know, what is the engagement level? What is the style of relationship or partnership that you actually want with me? What prompted that? And why does that feel like a good fit for you? Because through that conversation, so it's just opening the doors a little bit, through that conversation, there's other things that start to crop up. Well, we're really wanting to do X project, or we really want to do this or that. And as they are talking about those specific things, you'll find that they start getting mired back into that detail again. And that's where it's really important to bring them back to the basics. Again, of, well, okay, so why are you seeking to do that? And really guiding them through, I guess, that, is it because we want, the easier, greener, faster, cheaper stuff, or are we really trying to reimagine something that we haven't thought of before? Because that's two extremes. And there's a journey somewhere in between to take that.
Yeah. And if somebody says to you, for instance, we want to implement ITIL, that's why we contacted you. What's the
you had to use that word, didn't you? Actually, it wasn't the ITIL word that you used. It wasn't ITIL you used. It was the word in front of it that you used. It's like, you do not do and you do not implement ITIL. It's not a physical thing. It's not a piece of software. Stop saying doing it or implementing it. Oh, goodness.
Or compliant.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's even worse. I think
really?
That's even worse.
You do everything that's in all of the books.
Oh my goodness! I see, that is insane. See, that is definitely. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, having been involved in helping write some of the stuff in there, I'm just like, you would go insane just trying to. I mean, who even has the resources for that? I don't even think that exists, does it?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But I think what people also don't realize, and I mean, you've been involved in a few best practices, and so have I, is that when one writes best practice, you try to give broad advice.
Yes.
And when you write, you know that not everything that you say is doable for somebody.
Exactly.
And I think that's why the title of this talk is so appropriate. It is insane to try and do everything that everybody else is doing if it doesn't solve your problem. Number one.
So it wasn't just because I was the personality involved in this conversation with you.
And the second thing is the stupidity of trying to Control C, Control V.
Oh, look, copy paste is something that I think, there is a place for that. I will not deny there is a place for copy paste, and part of that is to kickstart something. Part of that is when you're really not sure of how to do something. I think this is where that journeyman master craftsman relationship comes in, because you're trying to learn how to do something. You've never done it ever before, so you want to experience it. You want to understand how it works. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to work exactly the way in your environment, because, as you said, context is definitely king. There are other factors that impact that, but certainly the that Kickstarter is fine. I have no problem doing that, as long as you have the open-mindedness to know that that's going to shift. There's going to be dynamics that come into play that you might not be aware of, that all of a sudden you're going to say, well, how come it worked for them and it didn't work for me? Or it worked for a little bit where we are, and now all of a sudden it's not working anymore. And it's not working anymore because it was there just as a stepping stone. It was there just to give you a foot up, to find your place and find a beginning spot. So there's nothing wrong with, something small to help you do that. It's interesting, and I'll take something really simple. Incident management as a process, not the practice, not all the other things that come about it, but the actual process of it itself. The 6 core activities of, we detect it, we log it, we take care of it, we do it, we can, all those things that occur. Every organization does those activities. Those activities do exist in every single one of their processes. The one thing that is different, and this is what I think makes them so wonderful and exciting to work for the different organizations, is they all go about doing it differently. That's why, this is sort of saying, well, okay, I've got the core activities, but how am I going to make that happen? And that is such a different conversation.
And how do you feel if you go into an organization, you see there's an incident management team and a problem management team?
I want to know if they're sitting together for a start. Do they even talk? Well, look, if you're talking incident management team and you were talking medical, then that would be different in some respect. So again, I'm back to context. If you're, names are really critical, I think, within organizations. I think people but they can also get caught up in a title or get caught up in a role name. And I know from, having written so many job descriptions and my background in HR, in the recruiting and talent management side of things, is that writing, what is a title? A title should reflect what you do, not who you are. That's a big difference about what do you do versus who you are. And there should be an implication there as to what those responsibilities are in regards to that. So incident management team, a team that manages incidents. And I think there's a little secret about ITIL most people don't know. If you want to know what those practices do, read it backwards. You are practicing the management of incidents. And just reverse the names on that, and it should tell you what it does. There should be something practical within that. As a team title, again, it depends on if it works in the context of what's the purpose of it, and does it make sense in the context of the language of the organization.
Yeah, but I mean, if you work in a complex adaptive system, I mean, having a team sitting somewhere let me tell you a little story. I mean, the first real service management job that I had after I became a version 2 manager, as I literally had...
So you were a V2 manager?
A V2 manager, yes. Yeah.
I would have... my first thought then was that something to do with Formula One cars, that was the next step down, like velocity.
So actually, my ITIL Foundation certificate was, or the course that I did was, it it wasn't called service management then, it was called IT operations management or something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
ITIL version 1. Yeah. But in any case, so I'm given all of this processes. So I had to manage all of these processes, and I can recruit people, and we did all of this beautiful stuff in isolation. And the rest of the organization operated in spite of us.
They got around you somehow.
Yeah, no, that's why I laugh when I say, when I hear people say, "Oh, no, we're gonna," especially a problem management team. I mean, how the hell does one team have the ability to solve all of the problems in a company? It's insane.
I
Yeah.
don't know, they whip out their red capes, or they've got a green emerald ring that shines somewhere or something. I don't know.
Sure. I just realized I've got the western sun creeping into my office. So I've got this spot on my chest now.
Oh, well, no, I can just make out your microphone now, but there's a lovely blue tinge from this perspective.
Yeah.
But I've also got the
Anyway.
light coming in from the afternoon sun here. I remember some others we used to do this regularly. If I get the light just right, it almost looks like I have a halo.
Okay. Saint Simone.
Not exactly, but anyway, it might look like it.
Well, take it if somebody gives it to you. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah. When do you say to somebody that you don't think it's a good idea to engage, or do you? Is it just me that's full of nonsense, telling people, no, I'm not going to work with you?
It depends on the why. I recently turned down, it was a fairly massive project. And I mean, this thing is big. And I was really super excited about the idea of it. Actually, the idea of it is super exciting. But I also had to consider the timeframes. So when I asked the client and I said, well, what are you first expecting and by when? I think that's a really important thing, is to look at and say, well, not just what the objective is, but what's this timeline idea that you have in place? Yeah. And we, talked about it a little bit, and I really had to think through it and consider my other commitments and the other things that I was wanting to do as well, and create. And I really did not have the time commitment and the effort required into something so large was at this particular point in time not a good idea. So I think there's those things that, wow, you can be excited by it and really wouldn't mind grabbing a hold of it, but it doesn't, at this point in time, doesn't quite fit. And so I guess there's those sorts of rolling door opportunities. Then there's the ones that you think, is this going to be more trouble than it's worth? And I don't mean that just from a straight money perspective. I mean, there is the mind games, the effort involved, the politics. How deep do we want to go? Is this just a stopgap for them? Very often they pull in an external person because it's easier for them to have someone else to blame, or someone else. And you pick up on things when you've done it enough. And when you've been through Absolutely. As many murders and acquisitions as I have, you pick up on the little signals that are coming or cropping through. But also, too, when you start asking the straight questions, the type of answers that come back at you, you do start to realize, you know what, this isn't right. I'm not getting the truth, or there's not enough visibility. There's not enough engagement with the engagement, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's sort of like, here, dump on you and you go and do it. And they say, no, that's not the way this works.
We want you to do it to us.
Yeah. And I'm going, there's a lot of things I could do. Whether you actually want that or not is two different things. So you got to ask the question, don't you, really? Do you want to go there? Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
there are clients that I was very happy sometimes for them to have left early on in my career. I think there's a lot of fears we deal with. I think there's a lot of fears we deal with, even whether we have a permanent role or as a consultant, in saying no. And it can be quite difficult to learn what that balance is for you. And sometimes the reaction first up can be extremely negative. And I mean, to the point where it can almost be abusive, where it can become bullying, and those types of things. That has occurred in the past. And there has to be a point sometimes where you've just said, you know what, this just isn't worth it. And you need to really tap back into your own value system and see where that fits. I can say I've built up a lot of resilience over the years from being through some of those things. Yeah. And that still crops up, of course.
Yeah. I always say to people that the benefit of an experienced consultant is not necessarily what they know, but what they know not to do.
Yeah. And how much scar tissue they might have developed over the years.
I call that being thick-skinned.
Well, that's why there's an awful lot of scar tissue sitting there, right? So, oh dear.
But if you now think, you know, you being able to say no, what about people in the organization that can't say no? Because my experience is that quite often some of these engagements actually do end up in becoming really abusive to people in the organization who's actually got a lot of value to add because they've got a hell of a lot of experience and they must probably know a fair amount more than their manager about the reality of the context.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's one of the reasons back in Australia, when I first started doing a lot of reviews, I didn't want to go and do the audits, the ISO audits and things. I didn't want to be, or what you might say, what's it called in the SEC audit type stuff. And I didn't want to do all the auditing specifically, but we would operate what we would call reviews. So we'd have clients come to us and say, okay, can you come in and review the support? And so it would be a combination of service desk, desktop, and other IT teams and things like that. And we would look at the overall portion. And the first 2 days were purely observational. That's it. It's just pure observing. There might be one or two questions that crop up, if say, I was confused by something and I would ask the odd question here and there, but the majority of it was just purely observing. And it's amazing how much information you gather just from hearing and sitting in the space. We have, we talk about the vibe of it, how does it feel when you're sitting there? And, there are times when it'd be really buzzy and it would feel really good. You would hear the tone of voices, not necessarily specifically what they would say, but tone of voices. And then there'd be times where it would be super calm and quiet and quite enjoyable. People were just focused in doing their thing, but there was no angst in the air. And then there's others, you walk in and you feel like you've just been walked into an electric fence. People are tiptoeing. They're scared of, cracking the eggshells as we were walking on the eggshells. Please don't make a noise or, there'll be trouble. So in those sorts of environments, it's in the reporting, we were never shy in coming back in what we reported back. So there would be the specifics, there would be operational processes and things we would report against. But we always had the 4 dimensions, if you like. We always talked about the partners and the people, the organizational structure and the HR side and performance as much as we would about the processes and the tools. And sometimes the response would come back and say, you can't say that in the report. We'd say, well, yes, we can. That's what we're hired to do. So but no, we can't be said, that we'll get in trouble for that. And so it's really interesting, isn't it, how quickly it can come back when they see something in black and white, when it's written down, when it's reported, when it's physically said out aloud. That's when I think is the opportunity where things can truly start to shift and change. And I had, look, no holds barred. There were points when I refused to be part or party to or condone in that fashion by changing something in a report that they didn't like. No, that's not going to happen.
No.
Because I'm not
Yeah, I
going to be
mean, I've
party
been
to
in similar
something that is
situations where I
going
just said
to
no.
inhibit a human like that. It's just
Yeah.
wrong. It is just
Yeah.
plain out wrong. And I think that's the thing is again, you've got to tap into your own value systems, and there is a resilience level and an experience factor that comes along with being able to say, no, that is not right. And you can always refer back to, like all the recent stuff with you, we would have said it's always been there, but it's now more in people's faces with diversity, equity, inclusion, and the more environmental, social governance is really coming to the fore now. So I think, we need to be able to say it. It has to be out aloud. It has to be written. It has to be, it's there to be discussed. If you don't like it, if it doesn't feel right or it's wrong, then what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, and I think it's also this issue of people not being able to distinguish between the person and the issue. That quite often, creates this conflict in saying, no, you can't do that, because somebody's taking it personal, and the issue needs to be discussed. It's got nothing to do with you. I think there's a lot of great things that we can learn. I wouldn't call myself a lean bigot, but I'm a big supporter of lean thinking, and some of the stuff in lean. And I sometimes wonder how we can get managers and supervisors to behave more lean-like. Yes, and even consultants go see, ask why.
When you say, when you say you want them to be more lean-like, I'm going to say lean like a panther or lean like what?
No, I mean lean thinking, like,
I know,
and lean
lean, but
management structure.
in what way do you want them to be lean? Because is it
Mm.
not still just being empathic leadership, or is it not just being?
Yes, it is. But remember what the Peter principle. You always get promoted to your highest level of incompetence. And I think organizations needs to do more to help managers realize that their role is not an industrial age role anymore. It's not to supervise. 90% of people in organizations are knowledge workers. Don't treat them like idiots and kids.
Exactly.
And I think that for me was the beauty of the way that a true leader or manager or whatever in a
I think there was one experience, a story from my earlier days, that I was coming in as the support manager, and there was multiple teams. It was complex health data involved and all sorts of things, and the company sell their own software system for it and that kind of stuff. So it was good. We had everything. We had the sales and marketing selling the software, but we also then had the dev teams, and then we had the support teams, and then you've got the finance and HR, right? Just a general sort of structure in that sense. Anyway, so I was hired on the support teams. Now, prior to that, I had worked in business mostly. So I, had been doing customer service, operating serviced offices and call center teams and that sort of stuff. So they were absolutely aghast when I came in and said, well, service desk is no different to a call center. And they all went, oh, what? I said, well, it's not any different. So, and they said, yes, it is. It's all technical and blah, blah, blah. And I said, no. I said, think about it from an operational level. I said, do you take phone calls? Yes. Do you have to log everything in a ticket? Yes. Do you have to solve questions? Yes. Do you need to access knowledge to do that? Yes. Do you need to, and I just went through this tick list of a whole host of things that we do operationally. And they all went, yes. And I said, so what makes you different to a call center? And they went, oh. And I said, I'll tell you what makes each one different that I've worked in and that I've managed is the type of content, the context in which the organization operates. Yeah. I said, because there are call centers that are dealing with medical, and there are technology centers dealing with medical. So depending on the type of call that we have, changes the people that we'll have on it, because it changes the skill sets and the competencies and the focus, from that perspective. But pure operational level, I have never found them different to manage. There's still people doing a job, interacting and engaging, having a journey and experience together with the customer, needing communication skills, needing data entry skills, needing accuracy, needing all the human stuff, needing emotional intelligence, needing, can you see what I mean? Like, so treating ops as somebody that just takes calls is wrong, because the real skill comes to the people aspect and the focus on the type of content that we deal with.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I told you about my first experience as a service manager and the stupidity of what we did, how do you get people who's really gung-ho about some new idea or a best practice or a good practice or whatever, to contextualize and not have that blinkered view of the book says that?
Mm-hmm. The fastest and easy way I find is doing experiential work. So I really I really enjoy things like business simulations, and I think they're extremely powerful because the brain has to engage not just on a thought level, but has to engage in their sensory perception of things. And so I really enjoy business simulations. I think they're fabulous. Even the remote ones, I've really enjoyed the virtual ones just as much, because now they've got all this added information coming at them in collaborating in a virtual space. At the same time they're talking, at the same time they're trying to listen, which is a real anathema, isn't it? Talking at the same time as listening,
I'm not sure you should. My grandmother used to say to me, my child, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use it in that proportion.
Exactly. So I really like the stimulations. The other thing for experiential learning is, if they really want to prove their point as to why they need to be gung-ho about a particular thing, is where do you see the actual benefits? We can't just talk the marketing talk. There has to be, take half a dozen situations within the organization. And I'm not just talking about, an incident that come via the service desk. I also want to talk about, well, what happened to the HR guy that did this, or what happened over there in sales and marketing when that account went bad. I want to see, how does that reflect across the actual situations that have already occurred, something that's done and gone, something that's already occurred. How would applying that change the outcome that has already occurred? And I think that's a really interesting point. We can get excited about what it can do and what its potential is, but it's really interesting to say, well, these are actual situations that have occurred. This was the outcome that occurred. How would applying that be able to shift that outcome? What would have been the dynamic change that would have made a difference for the positive?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's jump a little bit to the dimensions in Cynefin. If we say that best practice is best used for simple problems or obvious problems, how do you stretch that, or how do you use the guidance provided by all of these things that we spend so much time writing into the complex and complicated environment?
I work a lot with the guidelines to start with, so I'm going to work with what they find the most critical area. And I mean, I'm going to do an ER on it in a way where I want to know airway, breathing, circulation. That's the first thing is where do they feel that things are not just uncomfortable, but where it's really doing their head in, where they really can't get a grasp on something. And because they say, I'm not sure what's going on there, but you know what, it's really not right, or we're bleeding from that spot, or that kind of thing. And this is where I find I really enjoy using Cynefin to help people think about the predictable and the unpredictable. And look at what you currently have. I like seeing it on that linear line first. How predictable do they think something is versus how unpredictable this is? And then really crunching that and turning that into, understanding whether something's particularly clear, or that real distinction between complicated versus complex. And really understanding, are we just on the line? If it's really complicated, what's that? If it's really close to just, if it's really complex, how close to complicated is it? What kind of experts can we bring in, or what kind of play space can we create that will help us get it back over that line? Or if something's really complicated, what do we need to do just to flip it into the clear space? How can we do that? So there's that thinking side of it. From a complexity perspective, is saying, and it's really quite interesting when you have the discussions, and as long as they're feeling very comfortable, open, and transparent about it, and really, I'm not afraid to ask the hard questions, and I think that makes a difference as well. That you can really, I want to push the edges, I want to push those boundaries, but only that little 4%. You don't want to push it 20-40%, because because that they'll go crazy then. They'll feel it's not a shock and awe campaign, right? So it's giving them just enough discomfort to feel enough that, oh, okay, maybe I can put a toe there in that water and move to that way. But then there's the other side, because if they're in complete chaos, if something is really, this is where I think you need the ER work, the airway, breathing, circulation, and really, let's put the D in front of it. Is there any danger right now? What's the danger? Because that's what's really pegging them a lot. That's where the fear factor is. So we have to deal with that before we can move into thinking space, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And not many people know that you were quite involved in the knowledge management space also. So okay, so I must admit, I don't read a lot in that space at the moment. So that's why I don't know. Sorry. But how do you take the availability of data and apply it to a complex system and make sense of it? Especially, we just sort of talked about problem solving context.
Broadly, yeah. I'm not the expert, I guess, in the pure sense making mode. There's certainly people out there far smarter than I that have the expertise and the depth in that arena. For me, in a knowledge management perspective, Sense making really is about how people give meaning to something, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at some data, how do you make sense of it? I mean, for me, to take it really simply to start with is, I used to call it DICWIZ, the DIKW model, which was not originally ITIL, guys. It did come from business. It was just formulated in there. So if I just said 32, it means nothing. It's just data. Yeah. If I say 32 degrees Celsius, we now have a piece of information, right? If I say 32 degrees Celsius here now, and I'm also going off on a trip, or I now thinking about what to do for dinner, or, have the party, it makes more sense as I'm starting to connect the dots between the pieces of data and information, putting them, as we increase the context of something, we increase the understanding of it, right? So that's the simple formula if you think about it from that perspective. How do we take all of these little pieces of data, put them into context that gives us meaning?
Yeah.
And you can take the same data and it can give different, in a different context for others, give it a different meaning, right? Yeah. So just as at its very core, knowledge management for me, it has to be built in at a strategic level. It's not as simple as having a knowledge article at the front, and I have to say that's not overly simple either for some organizations. But what does it mean to someone? And this comes back to how humans communicate, how they interact and understand information.
Yeah,
and it's that
some organizations are drowning in data these days. Not only in the organization but also external data. Yeah, and then they want to acquire more.
What do you need to know in order to make a decision? Yeah. That's the thing. What are you trying to decide?
But what if you don't know? If you don't know what you need to know?
There's an interesting quote I recently put up on my Instagram, and they say, when you want to write something, whether it's a novel or a report or whatever the case, when you want to write something you know about. That's what they usually say. That makes the most successful authors, which is probably why some people are just one book wonders in some case, and other people have loads of stories within them to tell. And to me, reporting is exactly that. It's the story of what's going on. And so they say, write about what you know. And then they say, write about what you don't know is how we grow our know. Yeah, I don't know if that came across the way it should have come across.
That's perfect because you need to understand, you need to contextualize, you need to do research, and that's in the chat with David the other week, I said, for me the biggest learning is when I write.
Yes.
Because now I must make sure I don't write rubbish. Yeah, it's on paper.
Well, it's always good to write what you know about. Excellent, because that also hones your skills. When you write about what you know, you're practicing your craft, you are practicing your knowledge, you are practicing, and you're also being able to see things from different perspectives of what you knew before as well. And that's a great thing to do. But if you want to keep at the edge and keep evolving, then you need to learn about stuff you don't know. And one of the best ways to do is to write about it. Actually start putting down the question or a statement of some kind and challenge that statement. Or what can you find that actually justifies or verifies? I shouldn't say justify is different to verify. There's another thing. Language is so important, isn't it? Justifying something versus verifying something. There's different things involved in our decision making, but it's at the core. Knowledge is how we decide. And there are other things that impact our emotional intelligence. We tap into that every single time we make a decision. So there's all this data, but what's the point of data if there's no context to it, no structure to it, no sense to it? It's part of that entanglement in a way, isn't it? Of really sort of working our way through how connected many things are and understanding what those connections are. and how deep or how shallow those connections are, or strong or weak those connections are. That makes a very big difference to, this is where I think technology is really helping us in the machine learning aspect, that deep sense of being able to find patterns and things that we might not have been able to see before.
Yeah, just because it's too complex. But then again, I mean, I don't think a computer will ever be able to replace the our is it our neocortex, the ancient side of our brain?
I call it the crocodile brain, reptilian brain.
But I mean, that's where all our emotion and our
Well, I mean, I often refer to it.
It's an interesting time that we're in, I think.
Yeah, I think about it in terms of the triune brain. So the fight, flight, freeze. So many people forget about the freeze. They just think fight, flight, but there is a freeze as well, which is also that, they say like the deer in headlights moments. That's the shock. But with the triune brain, you've got to get past those things first, and then you've got the emotional side that you're dealing with, and all the chemicals start flooding in, and as a result of that. And once we've dealt with that, it's only then do we actually get to the thinking brain, the more being able to think through something rather than just from a feeling perspective. I mean, they are distinct regions, but they all peg off each other. They say that customer satisfaction, 75% of it is dealing with the psychological side, and the other 25% is dealing with the actual issue itself. That's the more administrative or technical side.
I mean, a few years ago, we had a company calling us in to do an assessment because the company was threatening to outsource the IT department. But they wanted us to do sort of a operations review. A half a day into the walkabout, I said to them, guys, there's nothing wrong. Tell me about what's your real problem. And we just taught them to communicate properly, and all of a sudden the problem went away.
This is half the issue, isn't it? It's just how they, for me, there's three core interactions. We've got the people to technology, which, yes, there is the whole essence of machine learning, AI, and there are some amazing things that I adore about the stuff going on with technology and humans and the whole machine humanity side of stuff. So people to technology, but there's the people to the process too, how we're behaving in that sense, how we're going about doing things. But, excuse me, sneeze.
Bless you.
Merci beaucoup.
You know where that comes from, the bless you?
Yes, I do, because I grew up in Catholic.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So it was.
Incidentally, that's also where the children's rhyme "Ring a Ring a Rosie" comes from.
Yes, Ring a Rosie. Where
remember that?
Oh, I do. I still know the words. Terrible, isn't it? That's how old I am. Anyway, so but the
no, we're not old. We're experienced.
That's true. How we go about things, but also to people, though, that's the most critical interaction. Always will be. So just helping them along, understanding how to communicate the best way, how to collaborate the best way. Watching people have that conversation. It was one of my favorite things when I traveled, to sit there in the cafe and people watch, and just seeing how they interact with each other. And when they are having such a good conversation, it really is great to watch, isn't it? Just seeing their reactions and the excitement or the depth of understanding or the way that they lean into each other. I really enjoy watching that.
Yeah, in a social gathering, you'll find me against the wall.
That's because
observing.
it's comfortable. It is
Well, it
comfortable,
may be
isn't it?
because I've had too many beers also, but yeah.
I was just going to say
Speaking
there's
of
a
beers,
different kind of lean going on.
I was
What was that?
desperate for you. Wonderful. You've done that, so I can do this. I'm so thirsty.
That's actually my second time.
Oh,
Is that the third time I've done
wonderful.
that? I just should
I
say
didn't
cheers,
even
because
see it.
normally we'd be having, normally we'd be
Well,
doing this
cheers,
at
yeah.
the bar. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Oh dear. Or Sante
Um,
or Skol.
yeah, well. So if somebody comes to you and say, I want to be a consultant, what would your initial response be before you
Why?
give them advice?
Why? What has triggered you in your, because every job, every organization has its difficulties, and I've learned to say that people are not difficult, they're just different, right?
Mm.
I think that's really important. They're not difficult, they're different. Difficult, they're just different. So they're seeing things from different perspectives. So yeah, what's triggering you? And I've had some people in the past say, well, I'm thinking about going out on my own. And there are the practical concerns. So there is, how are you going to support yourself and building it up during the period where there's no work? How do you still input to things like your superannuation and things, because you don't have an employer doing it anymore? So how are you going to take care of things like that and medical? And so there are some very, very practical concerns, I should say pragmatic concerns to me, that you need to address and have that in place. If you feel comfortable that you are going to be able to commit to, have those things taken care of to enough degree that, yeah, it's okay, I can put up with that for a while, then that's great, because it comes in, and yourself, it comes in waves. And sometimes you find yourself so busy, like I did, where I've gone, oh, I really don't have time to do that other project because I've got these things going on. But if it had been 3 months beforehand, I might have jumped at it and said, yeah, great. Yeah. So it comes in waves. So sometimes you might have 2-3 months where there is just no work. And during that time, you have to say, well, how am I going to stay productive, or how will I invest my time? What makes it worthwhile? And that's when, and you and I both know, you have to have a lifelong learning mindset. You have to have a growth mindset. You always got to be looking at, well, now I've got this moment. How am I now going to augment what I do? How am I going to shift, or those changes I wanted to make? Now is the opportunity to do that. So you'll still be really, really busy, but you'll be doing, though. Not, yes, it's what I call the no money busy.
Yeah, I just call it very, very expensive education. Because you pay your full monthly salary towards that.
Well, do you know what? It's not. It's all about the investment, right? It's about investing in yourself. So when you want to, there's the practical side, and then you've got to understand, well, what does that actually mean? And you need to have marketing, the social side, the building things that you may not have been comfortable with before. You have to expand your network. You have to deep dive. You have to start having lots more conversations that before you could sit back against the wall and just watch, whereas now you have to dive in. So yeah, it's a very personal. It becomes more personal when you're an independent consultant. It becomes far more personal to you. And it's also about choosing those things that matter to you, or topics and the way you engage with people that matter to you, and why they matter to you. I mean, we're colleagues. Exactly. And this is the other thing, is you develop a different style of colleague So it's not just the person you're sitting next to at work where you were before, or have the occasional lunch with. These are, I think industry colleagues. Building those relationships is absolutely critical as a consultant. And we have, and we almost refer to it as our ITSM family in some regards, in some pockets. And it is just like a family. There are disagreements every now and again.
And we don't always choose our family.
No, we can choose our friends.
Some of them are just there.
Some of them will happen to be on the same project, and you just go, okay.
Yeah. So,
but
would you
that's the
change
joy
it
of it,
for anything in life?
Would
you go and work for the boss again?
It would have to be someone fairly extraordinary, I think, for me to do that. It would have to be someone fairly extraordinary. The reason for that is, it's not like not having had the opportunity to do C-level roles, and it's a case of, again, it's that balance. Being pragmatic again, do you have enough supports or enough wherewithal for the financial concerns, because they're always there. But you know what? I don't know if when I'm on a project, it's different. But I just don't know if full time I could have to do that. You've got to be up at 8, in the office by 8:30, blah, blah, blah. I just don't know if I could go through all of that. Again, I come back to that whole operations kind of insanity that there's a difference. If you're doing shift work, you have made a commitment to do a shift at particular times. That's different, because we've made a promise to our customers to be there at a particular time, and so on and so forth. That's a different operational aspect to me. But I'm talking about the general work, day-to-day type work, is saying, well, I sometimes am more productive later in the afternoon, or maybe my mind is being creative about solving something, and I'll be up at 4 a.m. and doing something. But if I'm up at 4 a.m. doing something, then I still reserve the right to then, when I go back to bed, to sleep in until 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Because I've already done, Yeah. So I think these are things that organizations are really discovering very strongly right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's strange how this insane world that we live in all of a sudden is busy changing. Yeah, some of these preconceived, what will we call them? Expectations.
I think preconceived, pre-experienced, or the social norms have shifted again. What do I have? I've now seen it where we've got personal environments happening now, because we don't all have magically that second office and that kind of thing. So life happens around us as we're doing this, and we're not working from home. We're at home trying to work. There's a very big difference in that, and I think they've started to understand, well, do they dress up in their suit every day and still sit in front at their dining table? For some organizations, maybe they do, but, I think people have discovered you don't need to be doing that to take advantage of the knowledge and experience that exists here. This didn't change. This, what is in here hasn't changed. What is inside my heart hasn't changed.
Absolutely. That's even more important. Who I am hasn't changed.
Yeah, who I am.
I sort of
still
feel
here.
That, I can be more me in a less structured environment than I can in a structured environment. And if you employed me for being me, in my totality, not only what I know, but also how I interact with people, my passion for helping people, all of those things.
There's no magic portal. Like when we talk about the insanity of implementing best practice, there was this thing where we went from, all the different offices and meeting rooms to having open office structures and saying, no, this is best practice now. The best for collaboration to have it all open office. And I'm going, but that actually, interestingly, on a psychological level, killed so much collaboration and conversation because everyone started whispering, going, oh, no, I'm having this call with this client. I don't want them overhearing this issue, and so it actually, in many ways, the open office started to stifle a lot of conversation, and which was really quite interesting. And then there are others where you start to get the mix where the office was used to when you needed to have a closed door, and all of a sudden it was very noticeable when you had to have a closed door, and it just all got really stupid. You're right. It's just the way it came about. It was just stupid. So the intent of having more collaboration actually didn't work originally with Open Office. It's more there now, but now we're back to almost closed office. Because as soon as I close that laptop, you're not there.
Yeah.
That's closing the door, is closing the laptop. Or clicking the end meeting button.
Yeah, but there's also this expectation that you're always available. Yeah. People keep on asking me, I've sent you a WhatsApp. This is, yes. That was 12 o'clock last night. And? Did you expect me to answer then? For me, that if you really want to speak to me, phone me.
I've actually gotten to the point.
If you think it's inappropriate to phone me at this time of day, well, isn't it inappropriate to expect me to answer the WhatsApp?
Sometimes I'll send a message because that was the thought, and I don't want to lose the thought and stuff. But I'll always preface it by saying, no, it's the wrong time zone, or no, you're in bed. Ignore this till work, but just getting the thought out or just getting the question while I think of it. Do you see what I mean? So sometimes I preface things like that.
I get that. I send myself emails at night. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. My wife says, what's wrong? I said, I'm just sending myself an email because I will remember tomorrow.
I do this. Or I saw something, just as I'm about to close it, I saw a really interesting article, and, there are a number of our cohorts that we know that they'll just post something on there because they saw it and they went, I'll just put this onto our little group thing. And so I'll see it pop up and I'll start reading. And I'm thinking, why did I start reading this? This was really dumb, because now I, need to do something with it. And I will. I'll copy the link, write, 1 or 2 bullet points, put it in an email, send it to myself, so I've got it when I wake up.
It's terrible when you wake up in the morning, you can't remember the brilliant ideas you had. And if you recorded them and you look at them in the morning, you realize how stupid sometimes they were.
The dream sequence. Oh my God, how did I do that? Oh dear. But I think especially you and I work in multiple times. I mean, I work in, from the Antipodes all the way across. So I'm so consciously aware of the time zones. Even more so now when it pops up in the calendar and I look at it and I think, how come that says 4 a.m.? I can't have a meeting at 4 a.m. And then I realized that when I accepted the meeting that it was in that time zone, not in my time zone. And, things like that. So it is an interesting struggle to balance those things. But I think, again, you have to be very forgiving of yourself too. You have to know what are your boundaries? And the same for the organizations. Where are the boundaries on this? And you still, just because you used to spend 2 hours to and from driving to work or on the train, and some people, they would spend 4 hours in a day traveling to and from work. That's not a magical 4 hours the organization gets. That was still your personal time. Not you might have flipped through your phone and emails while you were on the train or something, but that was your choice. You didn't have to do that. Those hours to and from work were still yours. So you have to make sure that you're not giving those away again.
Yeah. No, for
You
sure.
know?
Let's get a little bit less serious.
Good. I'll have another drink.
Simone was born where?
Australia. I was born in
Where in Australia?
WA, Western Australia,
Okay.
just a little outside of Perth. I was in Western Australia, and it was my father. Still, he was he had a job. The company had sent him over there for a little while, so we had my first few years there, and then moved back to my father's home in New South Wales, in Sydney. In the western suburbs is where I grew up, and then joined the army at 18 and been traveling ever since.
Okay, so you joined the army, and
Yeah.
and why?
Why? It was a generational thing, I think, to start with. I actually made the decision when I was 11, which is, probably an unusual, but my father was a World War II vet, so I'd grown up with his, understanding and in that, the school shoes, hanging up the uniform as soon as you come home, polishing your shoes as soon as you came home, do the homework, and then it was playtime. So, yes, very strict. Oh, don't even go there. The coin bounce off the mattress, all of that kind of stuff. That protocol, very strict protocols when people came to visit and, to do with the children and all that. So it's quite strict in that regard, but very funny and very loving in other regards. Anyway, one of my brothers had also tried to join, and he had industrial deafness, so he was not accepted. And then another brother, he was accepted, and unfortunately passed away before he went in. So I was the third of a number, there's 7 of us, and I was the first girl to do it. So and I made it in, and that was a very big thing. And it was the mid-80s, so it was also I was in the 7th female platoon to ever do the male training in Australia.
Okay.
And in the first female platoon to throw live grenades and do a whole host of other things. So history book stuff.
Okay. Except for learning to shoot and blow stuff up, what did you learn?
Oh, that was brilliant. Oh, that was so much fun. I got my bronze medal in the rifle shooting.
How awesome that is for a pyromaniac, hey?
Oh, well, I mean, it's the stress release. The stress release from having older brothers pick on you. It was, I can't tell you, I'll have to kill you. No.
Okay.
Secret squirrel stuff, all the good fun things. That's how I got into technology. It was all communications and Morse code and all communications type stuff. And it was fascinating. It really was fascinating and great fun.
So you wore Hermes on your beret, I believe.
Yes, I did have Hermes. Mercury. Yes, Hermes, Mercury, whichever one you want to, whichever vein of mythology you want to go with. Yes, absolutely. And you know what? I really, you said something earlier, and a lot of people don't realize that, the nickname for it, we just call him Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy.
Yeah. And yes, I wear my Jimmy with pride. Absolutely. Communication, maybe that's why I fell into the whole customer service side of things and emotional agility and everything else, because communication meant people lived or died. Communication on the decisions, that's just a huge difference. And maybe that's why I stayed in communications.
Yeah, and also it's the mix between comms and then also the technology side of things. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
yes, yes.
so
You know, a lot of people forget about the fact that a lot of the technology we use in the civilian world was originally created in the armed forces.
yeah,
You know, email originated there, for instance. Just as a small, what is it, the Trivial Pursuit question, if you ever get that and you're doing that in the game. Yes, fascinating, because you get to look at, there's a real focus on how technology is purposed. And
yeah,
I think that has always stuck with me as well. You know, it was never technology for technology's sake. There was always purpose driven.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, made a huge difference,
And
and fascinating
and
stuff. And just, yeah.
and after the army, what then?
Well, that was an interesting thing. I had no idea. I had not intended to leave as such. I just happened to meet a naval officer, and being in the army and the navy, and that doesn't always gel. So,
So you
uh,
don't have a brown navy in Australia, yes?
not exactly.
So in South
Um,
Africa, we talk about the white navy and the brown navy. So it's the
yes,
navy and the Marines. Yeah.
yeah. No, we don't have that combination. Um, it was interesting. I was thinking, what do I do? I mean, I had so focused that was going to be my whole career, was going to be doing that. So, you know, we talk about, well, okay, I better update your resume, I better put something together. And my mother thought it was a very good choice for me that prior to joining the army, I did a secretarial studies course. So I became an extremely fast typist and shorthand and all the rest of it, which again, communications, there you go. So I would have something to fall back on. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I need to do a secretarial job, and that will be fine. The difficulty was not having a resume, not having anything I could actually provide the future employer, because the only thing I had was a certificate, and the only thing I was allowed to provide was this lovely little sheet from the services that said the job of an operator signaler is classified information held by the Department of Military Intelligence. That was it.
Brilliant.
And I go, what? And I had to sit down with the guys in the unit and say, what exactly? How do I apply this to the civilian environment? How am I going to make this work? How do I tell them what I did without telling them what I did? And so it's really quite a fascinating thing to have to do. And I think the best part of it was, I decided to go, you know, those job centers, and I'd never
Yeah.
done this before. So I went into a job center. I said, well, I don't know how to do interviews. You know, I'm now in my 20s and I have no idea how to do interviews. So I went in and thought, okay, look for anything like secretarial, that will do. So I saw a receptionist job, and I took that to the lady at the desk and sat down then with the person. She said, you really want to apply for this? 50 other people have already applied for it. And I said, well, I'm not expecting the job. I need to practice doing interviews. So she asked me all these questions, and I went, yeah, 98 words per minute, 100% accuracy. What? Okay, I'm putting you in the mix.
Okay.
So I got the job interview, and I think 3 hours later we came out of there. We'd been laughing and talking and all sorts of things about, you know, experiences, and next thing I know, I've got the job without having ever been a receptionist before. And then looking at this board and going, interesting piece of technology. And then I saw the telex machine out the back and went, I know how to read the Murray code on that. So I was happy.
Funny.
And even more interesting, my very first job was actually with AT&T. So I went from I went
Okay.
from a
Okay.
comms job to a comms job.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. And how did you end up in service management and all of the stuff that we know you from?
Well, it just went, receptionist, secretarial, learning, I went into sales and marketing on certain aspects of things to do with serviced offices and services. That's how I ended up in service management, where I ended up being a manager where you rent an office for a small fee. It's not necessarily a full-time office. It could be a part-time office or a full-time office, but the services are supplied to you. So receptionist, secretarial services are a part of the deal, if you like. And as a result of that, there were lots of other organisations that they had a big head office maybe in one area of the country, but they didn't in this area, so they just needed a little branch office for one person or something. So the services provided were the telephony service, the reception service, the boardroom meeting service, the secretarial services. So the whole...
Like a Regis.
Yeah, similar to that. Yeah, except since you've mentioned the term, I'm going to have a shout out to the guys that did it, which was ServCorp, and they had a magnificent management training program. So you didn't have to have sold real estate before, or you didn't have to have sold services before. Their thick manual, we talk about manuals for operations, their standard operating procedures was huge, and there's this scripts that you learn and all of this kind of stuff. But the big thing that they were about, you learn that stuff off by heart, but then you apply it to each client you meet. You apply it to the situation. You put your personality behind it. And that's where I really started, if you like, from that the business service management context, selling services and managing those services once they're a client. And did that. I had my first management role at 23.
Oh,
so
cool.
Yeah. Wow, I've said things on this I've never said on any other podcast.
That's one of the intentions of this conversation, is to drag a few things out of you.
See, you had me at the bar thing. That's what the trick was, wasn't it? Have it in the late afternoon and pretend like we were just having our normal chat. Yeah.
So I don't know if you can see my lapel.
I can just there. Is that your return serviceman? I can't quite see the badge.
That's a World War I tin hat.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So
I thought it was a return serviceman's badge from the look of it, but it's your
It's the memorable order of the tin hat.
I still have my original slouch hat.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my Jimmy.
So, yeah. So let's think about wrapping up.
There's a lot of military in IT service management, don't you?
Yeah, I know.
There is a lot of ex-service people. Sometimes I wonder if is it the technology, is it the structure, is it the projects, is it the some people tell me it's because we know how to get on with the mission, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and the other thing is also to understand that there's a rigidity in terms of a way of work, but you have to think on the fly.
Yes, you do.
Who was it?
The plans are old as soon as you step on the field.
Yeah, that whole situation of wonderful to plan, but
situational awareness.
Planning is the part of the journey, but it's not the journey. It's preparing for the journey.
I think preparation is still really important. I still believe very much that it gives you a toolbox of techniques, if you like, and approaches and things that you can use. I think that's still important. But once you are out there and doing it, you need to, I think we miss it. We're missing those competencies a lot, is that that conceptual thinking and complexity thinking, critical thinking, the problem solving practices that are out there. We need to be teaching our ground people a lot more of those.
Yeah. I believe, actually, I constantly say to people, the most critical skill that you can develop, and if you do, you'll always have a job, is to solve problems.
Yes.
And that,
become a professional communicator and a professional problem solver. Those two things will see you good in any role.
Yeah, and you can apply it in any context.
Yep.
So as long as you've got somebody that gives you a little bit of input in terms of the very technical aspects, because the way of thinking that makes you unique.
Exactly. I will definitely say cheers to that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So just for those of you who's watching, in my time, it's 5:30 already. So there's been a few airplanes overhead. But yeah, Simone, it was a wonderful conversation, and thank you for making time to have a chat.
I do.
I'm going to say the
there's
same
a little
as
saying.
Yeah.
There's a little saying that says from the Polynesian system, when we talk about ha, or the breath, the aloha, the breath of life, we only get given so many breaths in this life. And therefore, when we have a conversation, we are actually giving away moments of our life at that point in time. And also, too, when the other person is taking their time to have their breaths with us, then that's something that we should cherish. So very much, I have very much enjoyed spending these breaths with you.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I'm going to say the same as I said to David. I think we need to make it at least an annual institution, to catch up with a public chat. We'll share some other things when we have a little bit more of a private chat.
Well, yeah,
that's another thing, I suppose, from ex-servicemen. We tend to go off the rails a little bit sometimes.
Well, I mean, I think this is it. Did we actually answer the question about the insanity of best practice?
Yeah, I think we did. We talked about context. We talked about the fact that best practice is good, but it is there as a tool. It's there as something in your toolbox.
Absolutely.
We've talked about the importance of communication. We've talked about the role of changing leadership. We've talked about context. We've talked about the importance of data and
the knowledge management,
and the knowledge management stuff. Yeah, so I think we took a few detours, but hopefully by
that's
now
part of the fun.
You realize that we neither of us is saying best practice is bad. We're just warning against using it badly, and applying it badly. And for God's sake, do not implement it, or do it.
Oh dear. Use it as your guide rails. It was a joy. Yes. Thank you so much, Johan. It's been a long time since we did our book sessions.
Yeah, it's a good 2 years. Awesome.
Time to write another one, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. It's actually, you come to think of it, I when in that first interview in Verisum, I said, in 5 years' time, if Verisum still looks the same, then we've missed the boat. And I must admit, I think it's high time, because we're approaching 5 years.
Yeah, maybe the mesh just needs to have some updated material.
Yeah, but I also think that we need to, broaden the context a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's my view. what do they say? Everybody's entitled to their own stupid opinion.
It's true. It doesn't mean you have to listen to it.
Okay, ma'am, I'm going to end the broadcast.